Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories this hour. Ousted Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is set to appear in Manhattan federal court on narco-terrorism charges after his US capture. Both Maduro and his wife have now been transferred to New York court. Venezuela's acting president Delcy Rodriguez offers to work with the United States on shared development after Maduro's capture. She says her government now seeks respectful relations after earlier criticizing the raid as an illegal move. Iran accuses Israel of trying to sow division after Netanyahu voices support for protests in the country. Authorities warn of incitement as rights groups say at least 16 people are killed during a week of unrest. After military action in Venezuela, US President Donald Trump says he needs Greenland for national security. His claims draw criticism from Denmark. An overnight Russian air attack on Kyiv and its region kills 2 people, Ukrainian officials say. Authorities say these are the first reported deaths in strikes on the capital this year. Israel and Syria are set to resume talks in Paris today after progress towards a security deal stalled, reports have said. The 2-day meeting follows pressure from President Donald Trump, who has been pushing for an agreement. The US president warns tariffs on India could rise if New Delhi does not reduce purchases of Russian oil. He says pressure is growing as trade talks remain unresolved and some Indian exports already face high duties.
We will not allow Hezbollah.
The IDF says a drone strike in southern Lebanon kills 2 Hezbollah operatives near Jirmijeh, claiming they violated the ceasefire. Lebanon's health ministry also reports 2 dead in the area as Israel releases footage of the strike. We start with our top story of the hour, and Venezuela's kidnapped president and first lady have arrived at the New York courthouse for their first appearance. The strikes on Venezuela and the subsequent capture of President Maduro and his wife still continues to be a major global controversy, with many leaders still divided on the American action. Iran has called for the release of Venezuela's ousted president. A spokesman for Iran's foreign ministry, Ismail Baqai, condemned the operation, whereas Germany has urged restraint, with Deputy Government spokesperson Sebastian Hill emphasizing that everyone, including the United States, must respect international law. Furthermore, the European Union is asking for Machado's inclusion in Venezuela's transition. Let's listen in to both the statements.
رئیس جمهور و همسر رئیس جمهور یک کشور ربوده شده، این اصلاً جای افتخار نداره. این یک عمل کاملاً غیرقانونی است و همونطور که خود مقام‌های ونزوئلایی و مردم ونزوئلا تأکید کردن باید رئیس جمهورشون آزاد بشه.
Der Bundeskanzler hat unterstrichen, alle, auch die USA, müssen das Völkerrecht achten. Dies gilt ausdrücklich für staatliche Souveränität und territoriale Integrität. Wie der Bundeskanzler auch gesagt hat, darf es nun in Venezuela keine politische Instabilität geben. Es ist wichtig, den Weg zu Wahlen zu bahnen, damit es zu einer demokratisch legitimierten Transition kommen kann. Die USA müssen auch der Weltöffentlichkeit erklären, auf welcher Basis denn das Handeln zu beurteilen ist, was wir die letzten Tage erlebt haben. Und das ist bisher nicht geschehen.
We have millions of Venezuelans that have voted for change, and they have supported Edmundo González by a significant majority, according to what we had available. So the next steps are about dialogue towards democratic transition, which must include Edmundo González and Maria Corina.
Meanwhile, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán linked the US operation in Venezuela to global energy markets. warning that controlling Venezuelan oil reserves could allow the United States to influence world oil prices. Orbán described the incident as a sign of a new world, emerging with significant geopolitical and economic consequences. Let's listen in to the statement.
Venezuelával kapcsolatban azt szeretném mondani, hogy ez már az új világnak az egyik erőteljes megnyilvánulása. Új nyelv, ezen a nyelven fog beszélni a világ a jövőben. Amit ebből én Magyarország számára fontosnak érzek, az, hogy Venezuelával együtt az Egyesült Államok, most becslés, amit mondani fogok, képes a világ olajkészletének 40-50%-át ellenőrizni. Ez egy olyan erő, amely már alkalmas arra, hogy jelentősen befolyásolja az energia világpiaci árát.
Joining us now in this discussion is Professor Rohan Gunaratne, an international affairs expert. He joins us live from Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. Thank you very much for joining us, Professor Gunaratne. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Of course, this has sent ripples through the geopolitical world. We've just seen Nicolas Maduro arrive at the courthouse with his wife firmly on US soil in handcuffs, led to his first day in a New York court. The operation, however, is what's stirring all the controversy, with world leaders around the world giving their 2 cents on the current situation. Do you think this is a new beginning for international law, and what precedent does it set for other global powers when it comes to situations like this?
Certainly, Thomas, it's going to influence many other countries. We should not be surprised if China takes a leaf from this new chapter and threatens Taiwan. So I personally believe that international law, because even the American experts have said that international law has been compromised. But what is important is that the United States placed its national security interests over the existing legal framework. And that means President Trump reviewed the indictment that was where they charged Maduro and others in year 2020. In fact, on March 26th, the then Attorney General of the United States indicted Maduro and others, and that is the basis for his for the raid to Venezuela and his capture, subsequent arrest, and of course now Maduro and his wife being presented before court in New York. So all this is going to, in many ways, influence and shape the new geopolitical, the multipolar environment.
Of course, and Professor Gunaratne, this is expected to be a very long and complicated legal process with Maduro's lawyers. Definitely going to argue that he has sovereign immunity as a sitting head of state. What can we expect from this trial, drawing from the examples of history?
It is very likely that Maduro will be sentenced because the Americans have collected significant evidence of cocaine shipments from Venezuela to the United States after a group in Colombia called the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, or FARC, moved their operating bases into Venezuela. So the main argument the Americans will be making, the US prosecutors will make, is that Venezuela was a major base for the shipment of cocaine into the United States, and Maduro knew about it and he didn't take sufficient action. Of course, they will also present evidence where Maduro and his colleagues, his associates were involved in this transshipment. But the American criminal justice and the prison system is a very fair one. They will examine all this evidence and they will make a decision. So this trial is going to have a lot of global focus, and it is very possible that the US will give a very long sentence to Maduro.
Yes, Professor Gunaratne, do stay with us as we have further news stories to discuss. And we move east, and Greenland's leader has condemned, and Denmark's allies in Europe reaffirmed that the Arctic island's future must be determined by its people, rebuffing renewed remarks by US President Donald Trump about acquiring the vast territory. Trump's comments came a day after the special US forces captured Nicolas Maduro in a raid, with Trump stating that Washington intended to oversee governance of the oil-rich Latin American country. The US operation rekindled concerns in Denmark that Greenland, an autonomous Danish territory, might face a similar scenario. Trump has repeatedly said that he wants to take over Greenland, and speaking to reporters aboard Air Force One, Trump said he would revisit the topic in a few weeks. Greenland's strategic location between Europe and North America makes it a critical site in the US ballistic missile defense system. The island's significant mineral resources would also align with Washington's ambition to reduce dependence on Chinese exports. Professor Gunaratne joins us once again. Of course, this would be a huge flashpoint in geopolitics, mainly due to the fact that infighting between NATO has never happened before like this. Mette Frederiksen, the Danish Prime Minister, has said that she wants no more statements about Greenland going to the United States. We will see if Donald Trump adheres to that. However, what could emerge in regards to this? Do you think Donald Trump will respect Denmark and Greenland's sovereignty? Are we on the verge of something else?
Trump made very similar remarks when it came to Canada. So Trump's words are sometimes very performative. And I think that it is so important for leaders not to fight over such statements and such words. And it is so important for leaders to understand President Trump and then to restore the relationships and to maintain good relationships. And an angry Trump will be a threat to any country, especially after what happened in Venezuela, because he has taken Maduro's comments previously, because Maduro challenged him very personally. So if you look at Trump's social media, if you even look at the White House site that is being maintained, Trump has taken this operation in Venezuela very personally, and it is so important for other global leaders to manage Trump. If they don't do that, certainly Trump can become a challenge for them.
Professor Gunaratne, of course, a lot of domestic American Republicans are displeased with Donald Trump and his foreign policy. They voted for him. One of the reasons was for America to stop being involved in abroad. However, this year, certainly, this week even, certainly with his statements, he has been extremely outspoken when it comes to how hawkish he's being. In one press conference on Air Force One, he spoke about he insisted that they need Greenland. He spoke about the possible invasion of Cuba, saying that it was ready to fall, and along, of course, with the threat of new strikes on Iran. Where does that put Donald Trump in regards to previous Republican presidents, of course, in this old guard Republican hawkishness?
Trump is a very different leader. He's a class of its own. And I think that it is so important for leaders to manage him. Otherwise, it will become a challenge. If you look at Trudeau, he gave he ensured that he knew that he couldn't manage Trump, and that's why Carney has now taken on a new role of not only running Canada but managing Trump. So I think that Trump will become a challenge for many leaders, even for India. You can see the relationship between India and the US was disrupted. So we will witness this in the coming years until the Trump period ends. Certainly he is practicing the Monroe Doctrine.
When
that
I am
is
on TV debate,
Yes.
significant influence in the Americas, and sometimes he may extend it beyond America's sphere of influence.
Professor Rohan Gunaratne, thank you very much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you for taking the time. We now move on over to the Indo-Pacific for our next story. And South Korean President Lee Jae-myung told Chinese President Xi Jinping that their summit represents a key opportunity to fully restore relations between the two countries. In his opening remarks, Lee emphasized that both nations will continue efforts to strengthen their strategic cooperative partnership, aiming to make closer ties an irreversible trend. The leaders' meeting marks a renewed focus on deepening diplomatic and economic collaboration between Seoul and Beijing. Major General Gigi Davidi joins us now, a defence analyst joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us. Of course, a significant meeting for the Indo-Pacific. South Korea, of course, strong ties with the United States. How will both Japan and the US be looking at this meeting today?
Well, Thomas, before I answer your question, it's very important to understand the strategic dynamics of Korean Peninsula in the larger realm of Indo-Pacific. It's very sensitive region because, firstly, due to the ever prevailing tension between North and South Korea, and the defense line between the two, that is the along 38th parallel, is the world's heaviest fortified line. And having served as defense attaché in China and North Korea, I have my personal perspective and seen the kind of tension that prevail in this region. Secondly is the superpower rivalry, because there are two very important groupings. One is the China, Russia, and North Korea. They are very close-knit, and you see the North Korean troops even have fought in Ukraine on the side of Russia. And the other side is, of course, as you rightly mentioned, that is US, South Korea, Japan, and other allies like Philippines, and a very important region is Taiwan, which is very contentious. So point I'm trying to make is that this region is very sensitive and strategically very important. Now there's always a hedging that goes on by China, because the Chinese are known to play one against the other. Their old strategy of one barbarian against the other. So Chinese always play out either tension between South Korea and Japan, or between Japan and America, and that's how they play the game. So now this summit is important from number of reasons. Firstly, last November there was a APEC, that is the Association of Pacific Cooperation. There was a summit in Busan where President Xi had gone, and there was a meeting between President Xi and President Lee. And now this is I would say, follow-up meeting that is taking place, and economic is a very important facet of the relation between South Korea and China. Is that trade is to the tune of about $300 billion. And South Korean supply chains are deeply tied to Chinese. So therefore, this summit is primarily to strengthen the economic cooperation further. And also, South Korea has a personal interest, because they want the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to come to the negotiation table, and this way President Xi has a great leverage on North Korea because of their alliance and groupings. Now, how would Japan and America see this? Well, they would see it with little bit of skepticism, because currently the Japanese and the Chinese ties are under strain, because Takaichi had made a statement on Taiwan that in case China takes aggressive action against Taiwan, then willy-nilly Japan would be sucked into it. And also there's a trade war going on between China and America. So therefore, any such move with any of the three countries, once they are involved with China, is taken with skepticism by the other two. So I'm sure even this summit will be taken with bit of skepticism by Japan and America, but nonetheless, the ties between Japan, America, and South Korea are very deep rooted. So they will take it as some of the steps to ease out the tension between South Korea and China and basically building on the economic relationship. But otherwise, fundamentally, the ties remain very strong between China, America, between America, South Korea, and Japan.
And Major General Davidi, of course, this summit started yesterday, a day when North Korea fired ballistic missiles in tests. Of course, Beijing has somewhat close ties with Pyongyang. How does Xi Jinping and China balance its relations within the Korean Peninsula?
As I said, that Korean Peninsula is a region where superpower rivalry is very intense. So therefore, basically, you see, I have seen that personally, as I said, having served there as a defense attaché, that China has a great leverage on North Korea. And North Korea is used as a tool to create tension in this region whenever there are exercises between South Korea and America, or whenever there is a close relationship that is developing between Japan, South Korea, and America. So this is where Kim Jong-un and North Korean, their contribution in creating tension, and that is where often Kim Jong-un resorts to either firing missiles or showing his anguish, or also showing his unhappiness on whatever goes on. So therefore, this is a power play that goes on, and everything happens with the tacit approval of China, because North Korea is so heavily dependent upon China. Without Chinese help, North Korea will just, I think, sink. And now they have also developed close ties with Russia, as I mentioned earlier. So therefore, North Korea also hedges between China and Russia. So it's a power game or power play that goes on, and it has continued for last so many decades, and it will continue. But the point at issue is, it's always balancing and rebalancing that goes on in this region between the two camps, that is the Chinese, Russian, North Korean, and on the other side, America, Japan, South Korea, and Philippines, and other allies. But this region is very sensitive, and rebalancing is ongoing because that is part of the geopolitics. Thomas.
Yes, Major General Gigi Davidi, as always, it is a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us. We now move on over to our next story, and we move to the Middle East. And 2 Palestinians have been killed and 5 others wounded in the collapse of a residential building damaged in earlier Israeli attacks in central Gaza. According to the Civil Defense Agency, civil defense crews recovered the bodies of a father and his 8-year-old son from beneath a 4-story building that collapsed in the Maghazi refugee camp. As per reports, the structure had sustained damage during earlier Israeli airstrikes and fully collapsed following renewed bombardment targeting the eastern areas of the camp. In recent days, the Israeli military has intensified airstrikes and demolition operations in the eastern parts of Gaza, areas the army still controls under the ceasefire agreement that took effect on October the 10th.
احنا بيتنا كان مقصوف منذ عامين في الاجتياح البري لمخيم المغازي، لكن رغم وجود خطر إلا أنه استشرنا بعض الخبراء وسكننا فيها لعدم وجود أماكن للنزوح وعدم وجود الخيام والكرفانات الصالحة للعيش. سكننا فيها وإلنا عامين وتسايرنا ومشينا مع الواقع وحاولنا نمشي في هالحياة، لأنه زي ما قلت لك فيش أماكن إنه إحنا نقعد فيها. فسكننا، استيقظنا على كارثة إنه سقط البيت المكون من 5 طبقات وسقط على بيت جيراننا. بلطف الله إنه ما كانش هناك كارثة إنه 70 شهيد، هناك شهيدين، هناك 4 إصابات. عوامل الطقس والتعرية والطقس البارد، البيوت بتريح من ناحية هندسية، بيوت قطاع غزة حتى البيوت الصحيحة في منها خوف. ليس هناك بيت صحيح في قطاع غزة، لأن كل البيوت تعرضت لارتدادات عنيفة. هي من ناحية هندسية غزة ليس فيها مكان صحيح.
We come to you next with some breaking news from the United States, and an attack has been reported at US Vice President J.D. Vance's residence in Ohio, with one person reportedly taken into custody. Authorities have launched an investigation into the incident, and images circulating on social media and shared by local news outlets show damaged and smashed windows at the property. However, officials have not yet confirmed the exact sequence of events or the motive behind the incident. As per reports, the Vance family was not at home when the incident occurred. We'll continue to bring you more on that as soon as we get more information. Now we move on, and news from the world of physics. And researchers in China have successfully surpassed a long-standing plasma density limit in fusion experiments, a major step towards achieving fusion ignition. Using the experimental advanced superconducting tokamak, or EAST, scientists confirmed that plasma can remain stable even at extreme densities when interactions with reactor walls are carefully controlled. This breakthrough validates the plasma wall self-organization theory, which predicts a density-free regime for fusion plasma. The team, led by Professor Ping Zhu of Guangzhou University of Science and Technology and Associate Professor Ning Yan of the Hefei Institutes of Physical Science, developed a new high-density operating method for EAST. Their developments and experiments showed that plasma density can rise far beyond previous limits without causing instabilities that typically disrupt fusion reactions. This achievement could pave the way for future fusion reactors to produce more power by overcoming one of the field's most stubborn barriers. Researchers now plan to apply the method under high-performance plasma conditions to further advance towards fusion ignition. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.